The last customer stepped out just as the lanterns outside began to glow, their warm light spilling gently across the quiet street. Daniel walked them to the door with a warm smile, offering a soft goodnight before turning the sign to closed. The bakery eased into a soft hush, the kind that only arrived after a long, full day of warm ovens, friendly chatter, and the comforting rhythm of baking. Inside, the air still held the lingering scent of honey loaves, maple twists, and the final batch of cinnamon rolls cooling on the rack. The sweetness drifted through the room like a soft blanket, warm and familiar, settling into every corner of the cozy space. Pip sat on the counter, tail curled neatly around his paws, watching Daniel with bright, curious eyes. His ears flicked gently as Daniel moved, tracking every motion with quiet interest. Daniel exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders as the quiet settled in, letting the stillness of the evening sink into his bones. "Well, Pip," he murmured, "looks like it's just us now." Pip gave a soft, approving sound and hopped down from the counter, landing lightly on the warm wooden floor. He followed Daniel with slow, deliberate steps, his tail swaying in a relaxed rhythm. The ovens hummed gently as they cooled, radiating a soft heat that filled the room. The lights were dimmed now, leaving only the warm glow of the lanterns hanging above the work table. Shadows stretched long and soft across the walls, swaying slightly with the flicker of the flames. Daniel began his closing routine, moving slowly, unhurriedly. He wiped down the counters with long, steady strokes, the cloth gliding across the wood in smooth arcs. Pip followed each motion, occasionally hopping up to inspect a freshly cleaned spot before hopping back down again. Daniel chuckled under his breath. "Quality control, huh?" Pip lifted his chin proudly, as if accepting the title. The bakery felt different at night, calmer, softer, almost magical. Without the bustle of customers or the clatter of trays, the space became a warm cocoon of gentle sounds, the faint ticking of the cooling ovens, the soft creak of the wooden shelves, the distant murmur of the creek outside. Daniel moved to the front window and pulled the curtains halfway closed. The lantern outside cast a warm glow across the glass, and the faint reflection of the bakery interior shimmered back at him. Pip hopped onto the windowsill, peering out at the quiet street. His whiskers twitched as he watched a single leaf drift past, carried by the evening breeze. The lantern light flickered softly, casting a warm halo across Pip's fur. "Peaceful tonight," Daniel said softly. Pip settled into a comfortable curl, his tail wrapping around him as he watched the lantern light flicker. Daniel returned to the work table, gathering the last of the cooling pastries. He placed them carefully into a basket, covering them with a soft cloth. "These will go to the guest house in the morning," he said, mostly to himself. Pip watched with sleepy eyes, the warmth of the bakery beginning to lull him. His blinks grew slower, longer, until each one lingered just a moment more than the last. Daniel moved to the sink, rinsing the last mixing bowl and setting it upside down to dry. The sound of the water was soft and steady, blending seamlessly with the quiet hum of the room. When the bowl was set aside, Daniel didn't rush. He walked slowly toward the spice shelves, letting his hand drift across the wooden jars. Maple Hollow's bakery had always kept its spices in old-fashioned containers, round wooden jars with carved lids, each labeled in Daniel's neat handwriting. Cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, maple sugar, vanilla bean. Pip followed him, hopping lightly onto the lowest shelf and sniffing curiously at the jars. Daniel opened one of the lids, letting the warm scent of cinnamon drift upward. He breathed it in slowly, letting the familiar aroma settle into him. Pip's nose twitched, and he leaned forward, sniffing the air with interest. "Not for you," Daniel murmured gently, smiling. He closed the lid and moved on, checking each jar, making sure everything was in its place. The quiet rhythm of the task soothed him. The bakery always felt like it exhaled at night, settling into a peaceful stillness that wrapped around him like a warm blanket. Pip hopped down and wandered toward the storage room. Daniel followed, opening the door slowly. The room was dim, lit only by a single lantern hanging from a hook near the ceiling. The shelves inside were lined with bags of flour, jars of honey, and neatly stacked trays waiting for the next morning's baking. Pip padded inside, sniffing gently at the floor before settling near a crate of maple syrup bottles. Daniel stepped inside as well, letting the lantern's glow wash over him. He checked the inventory list pinned to the wall, running his finger down the neat columns of handwriting. Everything was in order. He took a moment to simply stand there, listening to the quiet. The storage room had its own kind of warmth, less from heat, more from the sense of preparation, of tomorrow waiting patiently. He closed the door gently and returned to the main room. Pip followed, brushing lightly against Daniel's leg before settling near the worktable. Daniel wiped down the last tray and leaned against the counter, letting the warmth of the room settle into his shoulders. He reached down and scooped Pip into his arms, holding him gently against his chest. Pip gave a soft, contented sound and nuzzled into Daniel's shirt, his whiskers brushing lightly against the fabric. "Long day," Daniel whispered. "But a good one." He carried Pip to the small table near the back of the bakery, the one he used for late-night tea and quiet moments. He set Pip down on a folded blanket, then lit a small candle. The flame flickered softly, adding another layer of warm glow to the room. The candlelight danced across the wooden shelves, casting soft shadows that swayed gently with each flicker. Daniel poured himself a cup of chamomile tea, the steam curling upward in slow, lazy spirals. He sat down, taking a slow sip, letting the warmth spread through him. Pip curled up beside the candle, eyes half closed, fur fluffed in a sleepy halo. His breathing settled into a slow, rhythmic pattern, each rise and fall gentle and steady. The bakery was silent now, except for the soft crackle of the candle and the distant whisper of the night outside. Daniel leaned back in his chair, breathing deeply, letting the calm settle around him. The quiet felt like a warm blanket, wrapping him in a sense of peace that only arrived after the ovens cooled and the lanterns dimmed. "This is my favorite part of the day," he said quietly. Daniel stood again, stretching his legs. He walked slowly toward the front of the bakery, letting his hand glide across the smooth wooden counter. The lantern outside flickered again, casting a soft glow across the window. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet that made the whole town feel like it was resting. He paused near the display case, running his hand lightly along the glass. The case was empty now, but he could still picture the pastries that had filled it earlier, the golden croissants, the maple twists, the cinnamon rolls that always sold out before noon. He let his hand rest on the cool glass for a moment, feeling the contrast between the warmth of the room and the gentle chill beneath his fingertips. Pip wandered toward the back door, sniffing gently at the floor. Daniel followed, opening the door just a crack. A small breath of cool night air drifted inside, carrying the faint scent of pine and the distant murmur of the creek. Pip's ears twitched at the sound, and he stepped closer, peering into the darkness with quiet curiosity. Daniel closed the door gently and returned to the main room. He walked toward the ovens, placing his hand lightly against the warm metal. The ovens clicked softly as they cooled, releasing gentle waves of heat that drifted across the room. He stood there for a moment, letting the warmth settle into his palms. He moved next to the mixing station, running his hand across the smooth wooden surface. The bowls were stacked neatly, each one reflecting the soft glow of the candle. He picked up one of the wooden spoons, feeling the familiar weight of it in his hand. It was worn smooth from years of use, the handle shaped perfectly to his grip. Pip hopped onto a nearby stool, watching Daniel with sleepy eyes. His tail curled neatly around him, and he blinked slowly, the warmth of the bakery lulling him deeper into drowsiness. Daniel set the spoon down and walked toward the shelves again. He opened one of the lower cabinets, checking the neatly stacked trays inside. Everything was in its place. He closed the cabinet gently and moved on, letting his hand drift across the wooden doors. He paused near the window again, looking out at the quiet street. The lantern swayed gently in the breeze, casting soft pools of light across the cobblestones. Maple Hollow always felt peaceful at night, as if the whole town exhaled together. Daniel returned to the table, settling back into his chair. Pip shifted again, curling into a tighter ball, his tail wrapping neatly around his paws. Daniel reached out and gently stroked Pip's back, feeling the soft rise and fall of his breathing. He took another sip of tea, savoring the warmth. The chamomile was gentle, soothing, the perfect end to a long day. He let his thoughts drift, to the customers who had come through that day, to the laughter shared over fresh pastries, to the quiet moments between batches when the bakery felt like its own little world. He thought about Maple Hollow, the gentle rhythm of the town, the familiar faces, the way the lanterns glowed at night like tiny stars guiding the way home. The candle flickered softly, casting slow-moving shadows across the walls. The room felt timeless, suspended in a warm, peaceful stillness. Daniel stood once more, walking slowly toward the back of the bakery. He opened the pantry door, stepping inside. The shelves were lined with jars of preserves, bottles of maple syrup, and neatly stacked bags of flour. He checked each shelf, making sure everything was in order. The quiet rhythm of the task soothed him. Pip followed, brushing lightly against Daniel's leg before settling near a crate of apples. Daniel smiled and reached down, gently scratching behind Pip's ear. Pip leaned into the touch, purring softly. Daniel closed the pantry door and returned to the main room. He walked toward the front door, checking the lock. Everything was secure. He stood there for a moment, looking out at the quiet street. The lanterns glowed softly, casting warm pools of light across the cobblestones. He returned to the table, settling back into his chair. Pip shifted again, curling into a tighter ball, his tail wrapping neatly around his paws. Daniel reached out and gently stroked Pip's back, feeling the soft rise and fall of his breathing. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply, letting the warmth of the bakery settle into him. The quiet felt endless, peaceful, perfect. The candle flickered one last time. The ovens clicked softly as they cooled. The night wrapped itself gently around Maple Hollow. And in the warm, peaceful glow of the bakery after hours, Daniel and Pip rested, calm, safe, and perfectly still.